Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for the Quantum Initiative Series event. ATARC presents the Quantum Workforce Development webinar. Our chair and moderator for this special occasion is Maeva Ganda. Maeva is the chair of IEEE Quantum Security Working Group that is creating the standard for quantum risk management for the Board of Directors. She is also the chair of the Quantum Risk Management Roundtable for the Board of Directors and the chair of the Global Quantum Alliance. For ATARC, Maeva is chair of our Quantum Working Group and the chair for the Quantum Initiative Advisory Board. The function of the Quantum Initiative Advisory Board is to assist the U.S. federal government in its agencies, committees, subcommittees, working groups, advisory councils, as well as U.S. diplomats and other U.S. foreign service officials in the execution of their charters as dictated by the laws of the United States and the U.S. President's executive orders. Maeva Ganda is a scientist and an engineer, and she also specializes in strategy and intelligence. Please be sure to join her this Friday at 10 a.m. for her quarterly update on global quantum patent intelligence trends and the key players in quantum intellectual property, where she will also reveal the new quantum money patent that was guaranteed just a few weeks ago for an international organization, a unicorn, and a renowned professor. And now I will hand it over to Maeva. But just before I do that, I want to remind everyone that we will have a live Q&A chat portion of this webinar series. So please be sure to send us in your questions and we will get those answered. And just for your awareness, this webinar is recorded. So thank you all for being here today. And I will now hand it over to Maeva.
Thank you so much, Kristen. Hello, everyone. My name is Maeva, and I am the chair of the Quantum Initiative Advisory Board. Welcome to today's event. I'm so pleased that you've decided to join us. We are hosting today's panel because of the new bill that was introduced last month in the House of Representatives. The proposed legislation, the Quantum Network Infrastructure Act of 2020, caught our attention because it's transformational. If it passes, $100 million will be made available every single year for each of the fiscal years 2021 through 2025 to fund the new quantum internet. The passing of this bill is significant because it will accelerate innovations in this field like never before. For this reason, we invited quantum experts to discuss this important issue of quantum workforce development. Our first speaker will be Dr. Carl Williams, the Deputy Director of NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, which is a vital part of the U.S. Department of Commerce. Our second speaker is quantum information science expert, Dr. Terrell France. Dr. France is professor of e-business and cybersecurity at Harrisburg University. I thank you all once again for attending our special event. And now we'll transition to Dr. Carl Williams. Thank you so much.
Good day. I just wanted to make a few opening comments and hope we turn this into a lively discussion. Many of you may not have heard about quantum. Some of you may be experts in quantum. I suspect there's a very, very large group. I want to start out by describing a little bit about what quantum is and to state that, most of the technology we have today is built upon quantum mechanics. Transistors don't exist without quantum mechanics, neither do lasers. But this is what we call the semi-classical quantum 1.0 stuff, the stuff that was easy to understand for physicists because there were stranger pieces around having to do with some things that they call superposition, the ability for a quantum system to be in two states at once, to be both on and off if it was a light switch. And this is kind of obscure and weird to people on the classical scale. And then entanglement. I mention these two concepts because this is what's driving the quantum 2.0 economy that we're going to talk about today. And these concepts, while they may sound peculiar or strange or abnormal, we now know that this is the way the world is. And I point this out because many people will have heard of Albert Einstein, but Albert Einstein basically spent more than half of his life trying to prove quantum mechanics incomplete because he didn't like these two properties. So it is the weird part of quantum mechanics, but that weird part of quantum mechanics allows us to build technology and devices that are far more powerful than any current technology we have. And this includes the ability to build new types of computers, so-called quantum computers, to build quantum networks and communication systems and everything else. This will transcend and revolutionize the technology we have available to us. And it is not something that companies or corporations or CEOs are going to grasp all at once. In fact, it's not something that the average person on the street will grasp all at once. But we need to start educating a workforce. Today, the people who are experts in quantum mechanics have all kinds of job offers. There are more jobs out there than there are people to fill the pipeline. And that pipeline is changing. While today, roughly the big companies will hire 50% PhDs, as time evolves, there will be more and more bachelor's and master's degree people being hired and everything else. And so the workforce is going to change. And moreover, we need to create quantum awareness. This is so that children growing up aren't afraid of these strange properties and are aware of them. And we need to start that in elementary and secondary school. So there's a massive effort underway to really create a far more educated workforce. Universities are involved in creating new programs and everything else. And we're going to need this to drive the economy and to create the technology for the 21st century. And so I look forward to having a discussion. And with that, I will pass the baton.
Thank you so much, Dr. Williams. Dr. Franz, please go ahead.
Thank you. Let me introduce myself. First of all, I'm from Harrisburg University, which is not, a marquee name university. We're in central Pennsylvania, which I think is an important state all of a sudden, I believe. But we're about a 4-hour drive due west of New York City, to give you an idea. The university is roughly 7,000 students, 6,000 of whom are graduate students, and the university's been around for about 15 years. And we started on our journey here at the university about early 2019. So we're new to the ecosystem, relatively new, but we're small, and we like to think we're nimble, and we can respond to the environment rather quickly. We're focusing in on the quantum workforce issues. Me personally, not only do I teach, but I also pay very close attention to the macro issues that Carl was alluding to. Let me just give you a couple minutes here on the way I think about the ecosystem and the workforce development challenges coming at us. Really, when it comes to quantum technology, I think we're in kind of like the 1940s of classical computing. And if you think back to your history days, that means machines like ENIAC that were run on vacuum tubes, and they were the size of entire rooms, if not a whole floor of a building in Philadelphia, for example. Today, so that means we're really early days with quantum. The theory's been out since Einstein, and those guys led the way on that. But we're reaching a point now where the engineering capabilities are such that we can actually turn some crazy ideas into reality. So when it comes to the workforce development of the classical computers that we all love and enjoy every day now, when I look at the development of the workforce and of that technology from the 40s until now, I'd see it pretty much as a very serial process. We kind of learned as we went. Computing and all that was still relatively new in the aggregate. All the pieces have been around for a while, but we developed this technology really in a serial fashion. We got the hardware together, then we realized, oh, why don't we create software so that we don't have to move the patch wires around and all that good stuff. In quantum, however, in this day and age, what I find very fascinating from a social scientist perspective is that the hardware, the software, the workforce, even on the demand side of quantum computing and quantum technologies. The industry users, as well as even governments, are all being developed all at the same time in parallel, which I just find fascinating. So there's a lot of interaction going on that really was in a sequential process with our classical computers. So that's what we know how to do, but in parallel, I find it fascinating. So what that means in short is, when it comes to workforce development, there's a really fun, nuanced gaming going on, for lack of a better word. We're not competing with one another. When I mean the hardware people, the software people, and users, and the workforce development people, we're actually, in this really interesting dance of trying to be in the right place at the right time. Certainly the engineers are all in and really pushing the envelope, trying to get things developed as fast as possible. But when it comes to the workforce specifically, we are, being instructors in universities and the training side of the workforce development, we're trying to predict where the engineering will be 5, 8, 10 years from now. We're trying to predict where the software algorithms will be. Will they be, in finance? Will they only be useful in biology, et cetera? So we're instead of seeing the clear need, we're trying to get ahead of it. And as I've learned since I transitioned from industry to academics move kind of slow, especially relative to quantum speed that we have in this field. So it's a real fascinating play going on right now where, we're trying to develop systems, educational systems, training systems for a workforce that actually doesn't fully exist, as Carl alluded to. Mostly it's PhD level stuff, which is right, PhD equipped workforce, because we're inventing things, right? That's what PhDs do. They create stuff, new information, new products, et cetera. So it's real fascinating in the workforce space. We have a very mature PhD system in the United States and the world, but when it comes down to master's level, undergraduate, and now even we're reaching down, as Carl mentioned, down into the high school level. We're trying to develop these educational systems to create a workforce that we're not quite sure exactly what they need to know yet, really. So it's a real fascinating dance. Just quickly, last thing is, we have several groups participating in this workforce initiative. We got the Department of Energy, we got, NIST folks, through the QEDC, the NSF, and who am I missing? The Office of Science and Technology in the White House, et cetera. So there's a lot of governmental players involved in here, and a lot of universities, all trying, as well as private groups now are starting to appear in trying to develop the workforce to a destination we're not quite certain of right now. So it's quite interesting from a scientist perspective on the social side, the business side, as well as, the main thing that we don't want to get wrong, in my opinion, is have a mismatch of supply and demand, right? If we train people too early, too fast, too soon, before there's a demand for that talent, we've got an issue there, not only just in price discovery for wages, but also you got people finding other things to do. So I look at it as trying to manage a supply and demand issue that is well into the future. And it's very difficult to convince academics, administrators and such, on programs and courses when you say, well, in a master's program, we expect only 2 students or 3 students to enroll. It's really hard to get administrators on board with that. I'll leave it at that.
So if I can kind of follow on, because I think this is an excellent points that were made, and it is a very complex problem to figure out what the future supply chain looks for. Like, and you're talking about quantum software engineers and quantum hardware engineers and quantum programmers and quantum this and quantum that, and we don't know what that balance is. But what we can I think looking at what happened with computers is a great way to kind of envision what is going to happen. And when you look at that, you see that in 1950s, there were no electrical engineers. Where would we be today without them? Mm. And what about quantum network specialists? Network specialists. They didn't exist because the internet didn't exist. So there were people who were doing telephone, but you know, it was a very different telephone system then than what we have today. So I think this is going to evolve. And I think what's really interesting is watching how much companies are creating internal programs to educate because they cannot hire enough. And so this is going to evolve. We don't know the speed at which it's going to evolve, the supply and demand line, but it is very, very interesting and very, very many corporations involved. The last thing I want to state is there's this quantum awareness is also key. To understand what it is without necessarily completely understanding is crucial because it's going to touch things like finance companies, and it's going to touch things like routing of airplanes, and it's going to touch other problems where optimization is the key piece. And these people do not need to understand fully what is going on the back end, the same way that most of us do not understand how our smartphone works. However, they do need to know that there's something special there. and so the training is really a hard problem.
Thank you very much. I do have a couple of questions for you both. The first question is, there is a massive pool of professionals that lost their jobs due to the global pandemic. What is the most cost-effective way for professionals, for experienced professionals, to transition to the new field, to this new field of quantum? And the second part of that question is, how can professionals without college degrees prepare for the quantum technology industry? Thank you.
Well, one avenue, and this is a use case, if you will, of professionals pivoting to quantum. You know, we've got numerous MOOC programs out there, and you know, quantum is not necessarily, if I may, not that difficult to a trained professional in engineering or a trained computer scientist. It's really a pivot of you know, maybe some new ideas and some new concepts, but the ability to think abstractly and all that really important stuff is already kind of baked into those individuals. So, you know, MIT, for example, has a program online that is probably the standard at the moment of pivoting professionals. They've been around for a few years now, and a lot of people I talk to in the quantum space now have gone through that, myself included. University of Chicago just started a program as well that is intended to be all in person. Of course, this year being what it is, it's off to a rough start. But there is certainly an awareness in the industry, in the workforce development industry, on, you know, pivoting these professionals. So, you know, there's ample opportunity for doing that. As Carl mentioned, you know, some of the companies, there are certainly companies starting to see that and developing internal programs for that. Won't get into the names, but you know, there are a couple of them that are quite on the ball with that. So they're developing in-house programs. Now, if you don't have a job, you know, certainly the MIT and the pivoting of using the MOOCs and other things like that are available to you. You know, one of the things that I'm involved in personally, so I could speak to it a lot, is, you know, the online presentations like today and online training going on around the world that is free and available to all. There's an incredible amount of learning opportunities out there. You know, on average, there's 3.6 events like this every day. having to do with quantum, and that's every day, including Sundays. On average, is 3.6 globally, mostly in English, of course. So there's plenty of opportunities out there for people who already have, the ability to lift that weight, if you will, and to get into the space. It's the newbies, I think, that are a bigger challenge, because the bar to get into quantum is quite high relative to other things. I must say, relative to other professions.
Thank you so much. Dr. Williams, did you want to add anything else before I move on to the next question, please?
Oh, I think that was a good coverage of the broad field. So no, I don't have anything else to add.
Okay, great. You mentioned quantum awareness is key. Are there any new policies that can help advance quantum awareness more broadly?
So again, there is a lot of things available on the web around educating, giving broader things in introductory material and all. There is an effort underway led by the National Science Foundation, who just funded a big effort to literally look at the undergraduate, look at the primary and secondary education system and figuring out what concepts we need them to have. And there's some really simple things you can do that look almost like magic, but prove that the world is a little strange. I mean, some people are aware, you take two polarizers and you put them at cross each other, no light gets through. And yet, if you take a third polarizer and you sandwich in between at 45 degrees, light goes through. And this is because of quantum mechanics. And so the fact that these little strange things, I mean, you tell somebody, I'm going to add something, I'm going to turn black into some light. And they look at you and they say, oh, you can't do that. Well, yeah, you can. So I think there are things we can learn. We don't like thinking about a particle going through two different paths at the same time, but we all see waves in the ocean, and wave properties are something we're aware of. So I think we can create that awareness, but it will require re-educating teachers, making them comfortable with the concepts, making them comfortable with the terminology. So it is not an effort that just comes out. Now, as I'm finishing up, I just want to point out to all the people who are in the audience, if you have questions, you should just type them in the chat function, and I'll just remind you to do that.
That was a subtle hint. Yeah, one of the subcommittees in one of the initiatives of the White House OSTP is asking those sorts of questions. How do we get interest in the field in general? And it's kind of, if you step back a minute, all of STEM technologies have that issue, unfortunately, in the United States at least. And so, there is an awareness of that. I don't think anyone's come out with the secret sauce, but, I think if enough minds work on that, will generate enough interest. But I would say, though, again, it's a balancing act. You don't want a blockchain phenomena, where everybody and their uncle suddenly starts learning blockchain and expects to get 1,000 opportunities out of it. So I stress again, it needs to be careful. Because I don't, in my opinion, and Carl, you may have a different thought, and everyone else probably does as well. I wonder what the total workforce demand for quantum will be if you, and I'm thinking about quantum computing, if you think of quantum like a quantum processing unit, like a GPU, kind of like a side, a service that a classical computer uses, how many people specialize in GPU technology? And I think it'll be bigger with quantum because there's obviously more uses. It's more of a general tool than a GPU might be. But, you know, I don't think we're talking massive amounts of workforce people actually working in this space. But, you know, as Carl mentioned, you know, to what, you know, some people like myself as a software developer for 45 years, I never really cared about the hardware. So, you know, we might have that type of, and there's lots of software developers, right, that may be needed. I'm not sure. I'll just punt. Carl, what do you think?
I think that's a good point. You know, again, if you ask how many people really need to understand how quantum bits, the rudimentary component of all this quantum technology work, you know, you probably, when you're done, there will be hundreds of thousands. But if you talk about how many people need to understand it the same way, do you need to understand how facial recognition software works on your iPhone if you use that to open your iPhone? Well, no, not really. You just need to know it's there and it works. So I think there are going to be layers, and I think that layer is part of the problem. The person who is basically doing optimization so they can do better program trading doesn't need to understand necessarily even the quantum algorithms. And I think you talking about a GPU, I think it's quite clear. I mean, I watched some of the senior people at IBM talk about the future of computing, and they talk about, oh, I first take and do some data mining and low-level AI, and I find what material I want to look, and then I go do a deeper AI, deep machine learning, and then I figure out a couple of things I want to pass off to this quantum processor to go process. And so the reality is it is going to be part of a heterogeneous ecosystem. And you know, if you look at the number of people who work in, say the semiconductor or in software, it's a large number of people. So even if it ends up only being 2, 3, 4% of the jobs, that's a lot of jobs.
Still a lot, yeah.
We had a couple more. I'm sorry, go ahead, please.
No, I go ahead.
Now, I was going to mention, we do have a few more questions that came in. Is it okay for me to read? Okay, great, thank you. So the first one is from Joshua Weaver. You mentioned using quantum technologies for optimization. What connections, if any, are there between quantum technologies and AI ML with respect to optimization operations? Thank you.
So this is a very, very active field of research at the moment. As you're probably aware, optimization, you know, classical optimization algorithms work fairly efficiently, but there's a lot of evidence now that suggests that quantum optimization algorithms can actually get to results far faster. This is one of these things where it appears that because it's a linear algebra type problem, that I can exploit some of quantum properties to basically get to solution faster. Notice I didn't say that it was better necessarily, but there's also hints that it probably is better, that it can get to a better result than your classical algorithm will get to. So it really is faster solution and perhaps slightly better result. There are some hints that just like the classical algorithm, you will never get necessarily the exact answer, especially if you have a really, really hard optimization problem, but faster to solution and perhaps more accurate.
Let me add just something to that, just to spur some thought. You know, one of the observations I've had in coming to this quantum space, because again, I come from classical computing application development, is that the research community, and I was doing this as a researcher too, I was looking for large improvements in compute capability and turnaround time and all that. You know, I wanted to put out that paper that says, you know, I could go twice the speed of light in something, right? And there's an interesting mismatch currently, because business people don't necessarily think about improvements in that way. Generally they think more, hey, I'll take a 2% improvement in reducing cost or a 10% improvement in speed. I'm not looking for a doubling of efficiency or in all this other stuff. So it's interesting to see in quantum, like most research, you know, we're striving, oh, it's not quantum computing's not useful in machine learning unless it, you know, takes a 10,000-year problem and turns it into 2 minutes. Well, I think the users actually are thinking much more modestly in that way. And I think in machine learning and optimization, I think we will see those small haircuts, if I'm using that term correctly, in quantum, where it won't be, you know, 6,000 times faster. But hey, if we get 20%, 5%, 3% faster in some use cases, that's a substantial difference. So it's interesting to see that the difference there when we speak about whether quantum computers are useful in a particular application or not.
So I'll follow on a little bit on this. I think when the general purpose quantum computer comes, and this is probably 10, 15, 20 years out, when that computer comes along, it will have a remarkable impact. So I was at a meeting talking to some of the aerospace people, and they talk about how much, I mean, they've optimized the airlines and the flights and everything else so well, but they optimize them beforehand. And then comes along the day and they have snowstorm and blizzard across the Midwest, and they close Chicago O'Hare Airport and have to reroute all their planes. And they cannot run the optimization algorithm sufficiently quickly in order to do that efficiently. And it costs them tens of billions of dollars. Eventually, this quantum computer will allow that to be done. And so this computer on these types of problems can actually have an exponential increase in time to solution. So these some of the problems is a remarkable advance because it literally tries all possibilities at once, which is kind of a strange thing, but this is one of the powers of the quantum computer. And of course, it's the thing that blows away our mind. We often say that it's highly parallel. Well, it's not parallel in the classical sense. It's highly parallel in the quantum sense, which is requires a lot of subtlety. Great question.
Yeah, thank you so much. So we have another question from Matthew Easley. His question is, what organizational structures will this workforce work in? Primarily research labs, business operations?
So NIST has been responsible in setting up the Quantum Economic Development Consortium. And when you look at this consortium and you look at who's in it, I have the Chases and the JP Morgan and the Goldman Sachs and the Citibanks. I have the Intels, the IBMs, the Googles, the Amazon Web Service. I have literally, I think that it will be almost everywhere, the same way that computing is almost everywhere. Yeah. And so I think it's going to be a very, very diverse workforce. It's not going to be in one place. Yes, there will be the research labs. Oh, for the scientists, this is remarkable. I mean, if you're doing basic research, what's the space that's being opened up is just mind-boggling, and everything else. So it will also be the basic research labs. But I think that what will drive it will be the economic implications of the technology. I think you will see pharmaceutical companies using it. You will see it in the hospitals, in better imaging systems. You will see it in many, many places.
Well, just to round that out, I mean, you know, this is the way I think about it is you won't see it in the accounting department. You know, it'll gravitate towards the most complex tasks or decision making in an organization. So it's not gonna, you know, it's not gonna take the dishwasher and the cook out of the cafeteria, et cetera. It'd mostly be in the spaces of, you know, hardcore, nasty, complex problems. So those people will have a new toy or a new tool to try to address problems that, you know, go beyond the capabilities of our classical computers and the math tricks. So, you know, I don't think the accountants are going to have to worry too much. Maybe. I don't know, Carl. It's still early days. Remember, Thomas Watson, the first president of IBM in the 1940s, said there's a market for 5 computers in the world. How can you make money on this?
Yeah, well, I think I agree with you, Carol, that when it comes to accounting and word processing, the quantum computer won't be very useful.
Yeah, it'll probably be pretty slow.
Well, before we wrap up, we have one more question from David Donato. His question is, will the development of the quantum internet require densification of communication nodes? If so, could there be synergy with 5G build out?
So I think that's a very good question. So one of the things is authentication. Quantum authentication is an area that's taking a lot of work, and there are probably ways of getting to replacing current authentication algorithms which are vulnerable to quantum computing using what is called post-quantum crypto, which is basically new algorithms that are classical in form but are resistant to attacks by quantum computers. And that's probably what will happen. The quantum internet is not going to be the kind of internet that you think of. It's going to allow passing of quantum resources and allow you to do some really strange and unique things, but will have far lower bandwidth. In fact, it takes a lot of classical bandwidth to establish the quantum internet. But it will give types of security and allow problems to be passed across. So imagine that you have a computation, a quantum computation that you would like to do, and you want to ensure nobody knows what you're working on because it's part of your deep corporate secrets. And the quantum internet will allow me on a local processor to set up my problems, ship it off to the quantum cloud where the processing will occur, and come back with a result, and I can guarantee that nobody knows what computation I did. And this is called blind quantum computing. So it's going to allow some very, very strange behavior to take place, but it is not going to be synonymous with the classical internet in any way that I can imagine. Now, having said this, I often tell people, the most important application of this technology has not probably yet been dreamt of. And I think there's a lot to be discovered. And so there probably are going to be many surprises along the way.
Yeah, let me add to that. I'll lean towards the 5G aspect of the question and the build out on there. It sure feels, who cares about feelings? It sure feels like, if you look at parts of the 5G technology, the antennae, and forgive me, I'm not a wireless expert, but I want to use the word tunneling, but that's not the word for it, where the antennae are software controlled and where those signals go out and how they're integrated with one another, so that if your 5G phone is within a 10-foot block, it gets really powerful, blah, blah, blah. I'm speaking out of turn here. But the speed and the complexity of 5G in the towers and the antennae, I suspect might benefit, in my view, from, as Carl mentioned, we think of problems being solved kind of like in parallel. Mother Nature is magically can find low energy states, to use a physics term, incredibly fast and efficiently. And I think the optimization of the antennae, where those software signals are going out, sure feels like something that and as we increase the load on these antennae towers, it just feels like, I think we'll be mixing 5G and quantum technologies together. But right now it's just guys like me waving their hands. But it does feel like an application that I think quantum devices can help, because 5G in its entirety has some pretty serious demands on speed and accuracy and things like that. So I think people will start thinking about that problem. Right now, we're just trying to get 5G out in any form that we can. but I may be speaking out. Carl, maybe you know more about the 5G space than I, but I think it has a lot of potential.
So what I will say is that there are new technologies for doing microwave and RF detection and electric field detection that are quantum based, and so in many ways it is surprising that wavelengths in that region of the spectrum are that the antenna is even working on our smartphones. I mean, they played every engineering trick in the book to get there. And so, yeah, I think there are many new tricks, and this is a lot of it. And I think this last point is very crucial. Almost everything that will be done with this quantum 2.0 technology will have classical application. So it's the engineers who are going to have to understand what's being done and how you're manipulating the world. You know, you don't have to understand everything in your smartphone to use it. You just have to understand the features you need. And so I think this is very true, and I think it's an exciting future.
All right, time. I want to thank you. I want to thank everyone for coming. Dr. Williams, Dr. France, do you have one last closing remark before we wrap up?
Sure. Yeah. You know, as Carl just said, you know, the last sentence there. I mean, this is an incredibly high potential space. Things look very promising. There's a ton of work to do. I don't know the individuals in the audience per se, but you know, if you are a business person, you want to pay attention to this space. If you're a technologist, you want to pay attention to this space, you know, because it feels like the money is flowing in from governments as well as industry, as well as private investments. A lot of people are seeing the potential here. And I look at it from the perspective of Harrisburg University, which is a tiny university, relatively. And there's just so much opportunity for individuals or individual organizations to get into this space. And at least in an ideal world, make a difference. You know, we're 1940s in classical computing. Could you imagine if you could create a little gadget that would get rid of vacuum tubes? What that might do. So there's a lot of potential here, and I encourage people to at least put their toe in the water and explore it. At a minimum, keep on top of it, because it will be evolving very rapidly.
With that, I thank you both so much, Dr. Williams, Dr. France. It's been a gift to hear directly from you. Thank you both very much for this insightful information. And thank you everyone for attending today's event. Have a great day.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Before we go, if anyone is interested in participating in our quantum working group, you can contact me at kpatton@atarc.org, and I will put my information in the chat box if you're at your laptop. My email's at the bottom, and above that are a number of different events that are coming up. If you want to tune in for some more webinars, we have one this Thursday for women in leadership, as well as another one centered on AI, TIC 3.0, and our data analytics lab at ATARC. So please reach out to me if you're interested in getting involved, and thank you all for your time today. Take care.